All right, this one started to fall apart just from me bringing it over here. So we have some flakes. I don't think there's anything on these. So these will go back to the mountain. That one we might be able to split again. Same with this one, probably can pull it apart. We do have some very tiny little specks in here. Probably brachiopods or something along those lines. Probably not enough detail to be able to see much. That one's a little bit better. You can see that right there. That might be like a first stage trilobite, something along those lines maybe. Now this part here, this part I know has some trilobite action. So if we go in, you'll see the larger of the two babies. But I was very excited when I picked this up. It actually fell on the floor. I'm so lucky it didn't break further. Look at the detail of that itty bitty. So we'll have to throw that under the microscope at some point. So that's actually the mold there. Here is the actual part of the fossil. It's all been filled in with matrix. There's nothing left of the original material there, but look at the detail on that little guy. It's a really exciting rock to flake through. Okay, so I think, yeah, that's it for the part that came off on its own. So I'm going to set aside this very nice little trilobite baby pair. And then we're just going to very gently see what else we can pull off here. So nothing's really standing out a whole lot. There might have been a bit of something there, but it's so compressed we're not going to be able to tell what that is. Probably another bit of a trilobite. That's certainly the most easily preserved. And I forgot some of my tools. Okay, no I didn't. They're right here. I just have a very small workspace in the microscope cover. They got poked under there. So let's see here. I think I'm gonna want one that does not want to come out for me. There it is. So these are actually tools for like dealing with pimples. Just gonna try and see about potentially lifting here. It's actually pretty held together at this point. So I guess all the parts that are going to come off easy have done so. So I'm going to take this off camera for just a moment here. This is the other side of the rock. When I'm looking for rock, this sort of organic redeposit of staining black and orange like this, with this particular type of texture, usually indicates that there's fossils internally. That will depend on the specific deposit that you're working with. Okay, looks like we got one loose, but for mine, that is fairly consistent. Oh, okay, it's not all the way loose yet. There we go. And I bring them up, or down, I should say, from the mountain, just because these are so fragile that they aren't terribly likely to survive if I don't take those precautions. So our little trilobites are still right over here. I wanna protect those. Not a lot there, but I don't know if you can see, there's a little bit of a film happening here. Right through there. So that's a something. Let's just move this out of the way here. We also have let's see if we can get, of course, the shadow of the camera is, well, that's not even the camera shadow. What is that a shadow of? Shadow of something is making it a little tricky here. So we have a higher definition little rusty spot. We've got the shadow there, and then there is, right, camera, can you focus? I don't know if you can see that. There's another something that was slightly three-dimensional right there, but it's too soft and broken to do much with, unfortunately. So what I want to do now, because I've got that carbon film shadow, I want to see if I can, oh boy, that is actually much more attached than it looks like. Okay, let's try, might be able to just do it with my, there we go. Oh, that's interesting. That is interesting, for sure. So we've got probably, I don't know if this is mineral infiltration or like little burrows, but then we definitely have a shadow here. So that means we're definitely going to want to put whatever it is that we're looking at here, because it certainly has a very strong margin. And it doesn't look like anything that I've seen in these fossils before. So we're definitely going to want to put that into our polarizer view. Got some more film occurring right here. We want to stay mindful of these little guys here. Get it to focus. Not going to cooperate. Okay, so I think this, yes. Okay, so this is part of this guy right here. So this is the counterpart to the better looking portion. Probably going to need to do some glue work just to keep this from completely falling apart. I don't know if it's super vital to keep both of them, but I have no clue what that is right now. So I might have just shown you the video on it underneath the polarizer, but I have not actually seen that yet. Okay, we have to be very gentle. This is 510 plus million year old rock we're dealing with here. Okay, so we've got an older trilobite, same species, Olanellis. I'm not sure if that's going to be terminus, or I rather suspect that this particular formation has clarkite in it as well. That is a pretty good view. That looks like that might actually be clarkite. I am not an expert though. I am still learning. So I will have to look into that a little bit more. Okay, we've got a few little triangular pieces right here. I don't know if you guys can see that. Let's see. Right here. We've got some interesting marks here, and that it's also on the counterpiece here. So we'll set that aside. This is pretty nice. I very frequently give these away. I was definitely doing it before I realized that there might actually be more than one species. But I'm not sure if it's just individual variation or not. So we'll take this counterpiece here. We'll set that aside with the others. Let's see, we've got something interesting here going on here. Let's bring that into view. So we have it's a very small detail from this area that sort of flaked apart right here. And I'm seeing some carbon film edge again, so we may have another of whatever the round ring critters are. And it is another one of those. Very, very interesting. It almost looks like, I mean, I would have thought burrows, but like this carbon film almost seems like this could be like an open vascular system, or just some sort of open system inside of a creature that then filled in with sediment. I appreciate that, and I apologize if things weren't perfectly in view there. This is my first video doing this. It may need work, but very exciting. Not sure what that is. Totally unexpected. So we'll find out. Could be a sponge, could be something that's not even on my radar as existing yet. All right, thanks. Okay, so I clearly need a stronger light source. This is our first set of fossils to go through this process with, so I apologize that this is a little dark. So here we have the two different specimens, and we're looking for some consistency here. So we do see somewhat similar patterns and structures occurring. However, I'm not convinced that they're exactly the same. The top one is more radial, and the bottom one is more like a line with branches coming off of it. And there's a big infill there. So we could still be dealing with some sort of open vascular system, or open like water-based hydraulic skeletal system, or some sort of porous system, right? We could be dealing with like some sort of filter feeder that has lots of channels and grooves running through it. But right now, even though there's some similarities, they're not quite as close to each other as I would like. Though, if you look at the upper edge of the top one here, let me get my pointer. If we look at that upper edge of the top one here and the lower edge here, we do actually see a little bit of consistency here with having like a thicker side that's more filled in, and then some lighter ones. So these could just be, one of these is actually rolled into a different position from the other, and these were a little bit more three-dimensional bubble type creatures. Now, there's no guarantee this was an animal if it is an organism. It could also just be like a giant single-celled organism. They do get this large even today. There are things in the ocean that size. But I'm kind of suspecting that this might be a complex, fancy burrow system in a mucus ball. So let's get these guys over to the microscope, but maybe we want to zoom in on number 2 first. So let me just pull this out. Let's take a closer look there, because I'm seeing a little bit more detail. A little bit awkward. It's a homemade polarizer. And all that does is align the light in certain ways to get rid of reflections, because these types of fossils are very difficult to actually see on film without that, and even with the naked eye to some extent. So I see we've got some carbon, probably some dendrites happening there, but you can really see, just how much material is going on there. Now we do have another little friend here. So, you know, if it is a house, that would line up well with that, especially if they end up looking the same under the microscope. And yeah, very, very intriguing. It's almost like there's sort of like a centralized hub here, and then you've got all of the little side burrows maybe coming out, but again, could be something that filled in a bit with sediment, maybe like a bivalve situation where it went into the mouth and got caught around some of the organs and then was compressed. Really hard to say. So let's look at it under the microscope. Okay, so that might be spicules, which would mean that we're looking at a sponge. Okay, so we can see here the sand grain size doesn't actually change along the margin. It's just the mineral replacement that is changing. So that's suggesting that we are dealing with an organism wall here, which is very interesting. Okay, so we're back a couple weeks later. I've been looking into this fossil a lot without much luck. I've shown it to people with more experience than myself. They weren't sure either, but I think I've finally figured it out, guys. I think this might be coprolites. I don't know what animal produced them. It's a little bit different from what you'd usually see in the Cambrian, but probably some sort of large animal. It's either that or like a microbial mat that then had scavengers burrow through it. That's sort of where we're at this point. So I just wanted to go through some of the pictures. I also was able to break the rock apart a little bit more. So I just wanted to go through those before we finish up this first video attempt. So we can see here, we do have some sort of little arthropod, possibly brachiopod right here, but the detail's not really sufficient. You can see this is the outline here of our original sort of coprolite. Now inside of here, we have coprolite inception potentially. These are either plates from a meal, or they're actually tiny little frass from the critters, smaller critters. So like a tube through here underneath, filled with the little poops of another little animal. Hard to say exactly because it just doesn't have the preservation detail we need. So here you can sort of see a little bit more of that going on here. But there are some other surprises that came out of this rock, so we'll just get over to those. You can see part of what makes me think that we're actually dealing with a coprolite, a little poo from something up in the water column. If it was down eating sediment, it would be hard little pellets, kind of like what these little things are that we see to some extent. But if we zoom in, so the detail on this one's not too great, but basically it kind of looks a little fibrous through here. So maybe like an herbivore that was eating algae. And so we have just these little shreds occurring, little bits of organic matter through you know, the goo, which would make sense. This is very much what modern fish poop would look like. Of course, fish didn't exist yet, but you know, it's something else sort of in that ecological niche potentially. So that's kind of neat. It does make me wonder, you know, what could have produced this if it is indeed a coprolite, because we don't really know for sure. So we're just going to go through a few more pictures. Underneath the microscope here, we can see tiny bits and pieces of other organisms, sort of these little tadpole-shaped things here. In here, we can see there's sort of these little flakes. They're leaving some shadows. That's from how the rock was torn apart, where it didn't release evenly. We've got, you know, this little green thing here. Some more of those little bits and pieces. I know these aren't the best microscope shots. My microscope's not really meant for this type of work. This is just sort of showing here the general texture of the mineral replacement in the fossil. It's very potato chip like. This is kind of interesting here. This iridescence is part of the fossil. I'm not even sure that this is exactly staining. This appears to be structural. So that did make me wonder a little bit if this was maybe shell related, but it's really hard to know for sure. And no one that I've talked to about this has really seen this type of thing much. So still not entirely sure. They have seen this before with shells, but it doesn't explain the rest of the structure. There's a closer look here. You can also see there's more arthropod bits here. Now the arthropod bits are not in the part that looks like it was part of the coprolite. They're in the areas that have been like eaten out by another creature. So that's kind of interesting. We got another little bit of probably a brachiopod there. These looked like spicules at first, but on closer inspection, it's just some texture in the rock. And then we've got lots of little bits again of some sort of little arthropod. I wish that we had a little bit more detail. It doesn't look like it's a trilobite. You can see kind of a carapace here, maybe some parts of a head here, and a bunch of little legs and stuff. But whatever this was, it's too small for us to be able to tell with the equipment that we have. That's a shot, I think, from the other side of that where it's split. You can see a little bit more detail. If anybody recognizes what this is from around 510 million years ago, give or take around 4 million years, that would be amazing if you happen to know what this is. But for me, not enough detail. Certainly doesn't look trilobite though, so some sort of interesting little creature. And then we've got another case of sort of a pyritized arthropod up here. Again, I'm not sure what it is. Could be a brachiopod. And then we have this little guy, which is very interesting. I think, this darker piece here, I think at one point was situated here, or it's two ends of the same fossil preserved two different ways. Certainly some fairly dramatic three-dimensional printing here. I'm not sure what that is. It's very small again, so it's hard to know exactly what it is. If you happen to recognize it, it would be great if you could leave a comment. But yeah, just another little interesting little creature in association here. Now, some of this stuff could be algae, but algae actually doesn't preserve that well. Yeah, I've been referring to these as the little buddies because they're fairly dramatic. You can almost see some plate structures here potentially. And you can see it's in that matrix that did not want to release, right on the edge of it. So whether or not this is the creature that was actually making these tunnels is hard to say. Yeah, you can see the texture here. This is where the rock was forced apart against its will versus over the bulk of the fossil where it very cleanly and naturally split. And it is very interesting to me the way that the rock tore in these areas. I've never seen that happen before. Normally, when I'm splitting a fossil, the whole plane releases cleanly, whether there's fossil material on it or not. So this one having like the structure that was trying to hold it together, it's a little bit different. I don't know if that gives clues to someone who's more experienced as to what's going on here. I thought maybe it has something to do with just the chemistry for coprolites, because the only time I've ever seen tearing texture around it was when I was looking through all of the materials I could find online. There were some pictures of coprolites that looked like they had that effect near them when the rock was split. So I am leaning towards coprolite for that, and many other reasons at this point. So coprolite was something that burrowed through it, which is actually potentially more interesting than a body fossil because it kind of tells us a story, you know, like now we've got this evidence of this ecological pattern that's kind of exciting because you have these big animals, they're releasing these loose stools like what you would find in like a squid or a fish today. And then you have these little detritivores that come in and they feed off of that, and they have like a feeding pattern where they take advantage of that. And so then the question becomes, you know, what is the creature that made the coprolite? What is the creature that's feeding off of the coprolite? How do they relate in the ecosystem? And how cool is it that it looks so much like a modern scenario for that? Assuming this is a coprolite, this could still be a microbial colony that got burrowed through. It still could be a very weird preservation of a sponge. I'm just not experienced enough to know. And even those with lots of experience, here we see exploded arthropod, additional exploded arthropod. Even people with tons of experience do not necessarily have the ability to answer these questions with a single fossil. So what we'll end up doing is putting this into a box as round mysteries. And then we'll see if we have other round mysteries around the same size that come through with other preservations. That might help us, you know, put more pieces together. But at the moment, I'm leaning towards coprolite. So yeah, we've got all this material here. Whatever this creature was, it was quite elaborately segmented. I think these are leg materials. It certainly looks a little spiny. I wish we had slightly higher quality. We might actually be able to recognize this. But again, if you recognize what this arthropod was, that would be amazing if you could share it in the comments. Or you can tell me that I'm dumb and it's a polychaete. That's fine. I'm cool with that too. A Wawaxia maybe? Who knows? So yeah, Wawaxia, for those unfamiliar with it, is a it's thought to be something related to mollusks, or an actual mollusk that had lots of little plates and spines over it. It probably would have been in eating the algae too, so if a larger algae eater came through, they could easily suck them in. But if this was a microbial mat, that could have been one that was chowing along and actually made the tunnels and then got crushed and disarticulated a bit before fossilization. There's so many potentials here. Here we've got our little micro pellets potentially showing at the bottom of this image again. And just for some scale here, I know that, you know, you were seeing it against my hand, but different people have different sized hands. So this is a centimeter. We can see, you know, just quite lovely, the pattern and the detail here. And there really isn't a whole lot that I could find in the literature with this structural pattern, other than it is sort of in the sort of the dendritic. It's not, they're not dendrites like the crystals that form, but, you know, dendritic sort of tunneling patterns used for filtering and capturing little creatures. You see this in body plants, you see it in tunnel structures meant for snagging things. So just some more images through here. Again, here we can see some more of the organic parts that sort of stuck around. I mean, this could easily be, you know, stringier bits of an algae through here. So a few different images of that. This is our larger, chunky, square brachiopod or arthropod of some sort. You can see a little bit more detail on that guy. If anyone recognizes it, please share. This area through here, we can see a little bit more detail, some more signs of pellets. We have another one of those square guys. Really showing off the texture here of how the rock sort of frayed apart, almost like it was a lump of poop. And, you know, maybe we're looking at it wrong. Maybe I'm looking at it wrong. Maybe with coprolites, the inner part ends up having this texture that looks the same as the surrounding rock, but with this fibrous tendency, and the rest is just the areas that got the gush, you know, the more liquidy part. I'm just not familiar enough to know. Another just general view of the texture and crystal of the mineral replacement. This little guy here, there's a couple of different things that can make this shape. Sponge spicules being one of them when they've weathered. The other being, to the best of my understanding, pyrite crystals can also make this shape. I don't know if it's relevant or not, but you can see these little disky things. I think this is a byproduct of the fossilization product, though, rather than the fossil itself. However, if I'm wrong on that, please let me know. Again, we just have some more of the texture showing. We've got, you'll see these fibers a lot on my fossils. This is a type of lichen that's growing in the area, and it's so tiny, and when they die and dry out, they like to blow around and stick to the fossils in different places. So they start out on the outside of the fossil, but even when I split them open, they'll kind of drift in there because they're just so lightweight. I try to wash them off, but they're kind of a pain. So it's basically dust. You'll see them slightly different colors and different thicknesses based on how recent they died. This is kind of interesting because in here we've got some sort of crystally structures. So I kind of just marked them over to see if there's anything of interest here. We do have this star, which is very interesting. That does appear on some animals as sort of in echinoderms, you'll see something kind of like this. They always have it somewhere on their body. It's just a question of where. However, over here, we've got a little guy here with a couple of pieces coming off, and I think that might be where everything else is coming from. That or up here. These might actually be teeny tiny little sponges that got mixed in here. Or I've been looking at it too long. I could have been looking at it too long, guys. I might be seeing things. Okay, so this here, I know what this is. So this I found while getting some of the close-up photography. So this is frass, again, which is a nice way of saying chunky little poops like what come out of insects and crustaceans and things like that. So arthropod, and also like certain types of worms and things too. So they'll make these tiny little pellets, and they will pack burrows filled with them. And that's what we're seeing here. And you see burrows made of this stuff everywhere in this fossil bed. So that doesn't really have any meaning. Now we're going to switch over to some of the rocks that flaked off after I finished recording. I was able to break things down a little bit more for packing very carefully. And these are kind of interesting. I don't know what these are. If anybody knows what these are, please share. I suspect that they might be, again, sponges that have like some remnant spicules, but they're wrinkly looking, which is a little bit confusing. Again, we have some of that pink iridescent type of material happening. We also have this yellow gunk. This yellow gunk, I don't know if this is what the stuff that they call spongin, which you tend to find in association with sponge fossils, or if this is something else. If anyone's more experienced, please let me know. They do kind of look like jellyfish. It's really hard to tell exactly what it is that we're looking at. But we certainly do have some interest here. Here's for scale. They're pretty small. We've got this very hard little centralized nubbin, and then we've got these lines going between them. So they could be some sort of fancy burrow system again. They could be, the choya type of sponges. We do have choya in here. You can also see we've got some lines over here that kind of look like a regular impression structure, but because there's so much on this deathbed here piled on top of each other, we might not be able to tell. But if you do happen to recognize it, please let me know. I do think it's a pretty cool looking fossil. This was another piece where when I flaked it off, just a little top layer came off. And again, we could see all of this, you know, very organized frass type of coprolites here. Potentially, some of these are organized enough that I do wonder if they're plates off of like a worm, like they're actually the sheds from a worm. I don't entirely know how to 100% for sure know which you're dealing with. I do know that if it's super organized looking, it's not frass. It's a shed from one of these armored worms. But it's really hard when they're jumbled up like this. This is just for reference here. So this is actually the outside of the rock. This is what I look for when looking for an area where there could be high quality fossils. There'll be just all this gunk. It's kind of waxy material. You'll see here the black part here, most of it is right here. See this? This is a carbon dendrite here. So these are not part of the fossil, but these grow when fossils are nearby because they're taking advantage of the iron and the carbon and the organic molecules in the area and basically recrystallizing. But if we zoom out here, you can see there's a larger structure here with some lines running through it, these plates here. So this was probably part of some sort of larger creature. Different pieces fell down layered on top of each other. If you recognize what this is, again, please, you know, leave it in the comments. Most of the time when I find these really thick organic redeposits, you know, they're badly weathered, right? But just below or just above them are going to be less weathered ones. Something about the chemistry in the rock, I'm not entirely sure, but it's sort of like if there's a deathbed that forms like this from like one era, right next to that era, it's going to be way easier for high quality fossils to form. And I have no clue how that works. I assume it has something to do with the chemistry of having already had a thick buildup, and then maybe there's not as much oxygen. So then the next layer that deposits, or it had the next layer. I don't know. I don't know. That's one of the great mysteries of paleontology. I don't know if anyone knows, but in this fossil bed, if I find this type of material nearby, I'm going to find more readable. And sometimes there are readable sections in this material. They're just really badly distorted from everything being stacked on top of each other. And this is all under the polarizer, so it's a lot clearer than when we would be doing our standard recordings. So this, you can see again, thick scuzz here. This is just one layer below, so basically I was able to knock this off, I think. Yeah, or it's upside down here. Yeah, I flipped it. So I was able to basically knock it off thin. This is the underside, or possibly the upper side of it. We can see we have a shadowy thing here. It's not shiny as the one that we were seeing before. If we zoom in really close, you can see some of the little pellet structures happening there. But I want to just draw your attention to a couple of things. We've got these planes here. I am not sure what these are yet, but we do have this very consistent spacing of these long lines. These show up a lot in this fossil bed. So they're not, you know, like a lot of times cracks form along them, but I do not think they are caused by the cracks forming there. We would worry about staining coming through the crack, right? That is not the case because they do not always have a crack. Sometimes they have a crack, oftentimes they have a crack. They do not always have a crack. So like this one over here, I don't think has a crack. Yeah, there's no crack here. See, it's just a weak point because of the fossil material. We've also got, you know, like a bit coming through here. And you're also going to see this nice arc right here and sort of a divot. So that's the edge of, that's almost certainly the edge of a part of a large trilobite that has not preserved well. It just gave us a little bit of an impression there. And you can see this rustiness right here. This is different than the yellow scuzz. This is rust. This rusty material here, that was pyrite at one point, and then it weathered and decayed away. So this was probably either the edge of a large trilobite or an antenna off of one of them. So you can see it here. We've got, this looks like a bit like a swimming paddle here, and then we've got the leg coming off of here. Now, I wouldn't, bet my life on that because it's very degraded, but there's a good chance that that's sort of what we're looking at. So the part closest to the body, the swimming part right here, and then the little walking leg coming off of the end. The more you spend time looking at these rocks and looking at better versions of fossils when you can identify a piece of them, the more you can read them. And that's sort of what makes them fun. So yeah, there was actually quite a lot going on in here. When I opened it up, we could see we have over here, this is interesting. They kind of look like carbon dendrites, but something's not quite right about them. They don't quite look the same. And I think there might be some dendriting on here, but I do believe because they're so different looking from any other carbon dendrites that I've seen, this may actually be some algae. And then the dendrites kind of grew off of them from there, because I've never seen this exact pattern of dendriting anywhere in the rock before, and I've seen a lot of dendriting. You start to get a feel for it after a while. So just another view here. You can see the layer upon layer of different things as I'm shifting sort of the focus and the light. You can see this is a big piece of a trilobite again. And the reason that I know that is because of this particular texture and coloration. So this is also a nice big plate right here. This kind of purpley, this texture. Every time I see this texture, I have seen it enough in association with very clearly, definitely that's trilobite, to know that these are chunks of highly compressed trilobite exoskeleton. So just a little bit more, we could see another one of those arcs there. We can zoom in a little bit. The thickness here, this is probably an antenna, or it's a thicker ridge. I've noticed a lot of the trilobites in this deposit have a thick edge to their cuticle around their head shields, and I think that may fossilize a little bit better than the rest of the fossils. So sometimes you could get ridges that way, or it's pieces of the antenna. This was clearly right over here. This is some larger pyrite thing that happened. We do have some segmentation visible here. But good luck telling what that is. It's mangled. This is all stuff that decayed heavily before it fossilized. But, we shift angles again here, and we can actually see really good segmentation, right? Each of these really strong segmentation. So this is probably the middle section of a trilobite that was quite hefty, but again, badly distorted, not terribly useful, other than to tell us there's some big boys in here. Again, this here we can actually see, in this case, this particular one is actually the edge of what's probably a cephalon, because we've got a bit more of the material, so that thickness that I was talking about. So the real value in this is just getting to learn to read the rock. So here we've got those lines coming through again, and here we've got a lot of carbon dendrites happening. Now, in this particular case, I am not 100% sure if those are purely dendrites or if they're actually like remnants of maybe algae or something, because the pattern's a little bit weird. It's not quite as crystally dendrite-y as I would have expected, and they're kind of the same shapes repeating, but they don't match other dendrites. So I don't know if this is dendrites that then degraded into these little patchy things, or if this is something else. And we also have this bigger squishy thing right here. Big flake of carbon, big chunk. Don't see these terribly often in this formation. So again, I'm thinking maybe a piece of algae that managed to fossilize. My understanding is that algae does not fossilize easily, but when it does, it tends to be like a giant chunk of carbon. So just, another view of it. And then we had some interesting bits here. Let's see. So this right here, this didn't show up until I put it in the polarizer. So polarizer is really cool, organizing the light vertically and horizontally in such a way to, reduce reflections and sort of flatten things out. So we can see we have a trail of a creature that came through here, and then we have its little body, which you do not get very often. Now, unfortunately, the quality here of the little body, this is the little body from the counterpart, the other half of the rock. And this is actually the other side of that rock. There was a trilobite in there. Looking more at the trail here, we could see some of those little frass bits through here. So this was sort of like a maybe a structured tube of some sort. I think I've got some microscope shots in here somewhere, but we'll just bounce back real quick to this guy right here. So we can kind of see a little bit. We've got maybe like a little bit of forking here. We've got sort of 5 little nubbins here in sort of the cross section where like the body is kind of almost broken off. We could see a little bit something going on over here, so it could have been larger or not completely fossilized, or this was like another area of the tube. I'm not entirely sure what's happening there. I mean, it's just there's just not enough detail through here, but you can see there's certainly some little plates and things involved here. So that was some sort of little armored creature. And I do think it's kind of neat that we can see sort of its trail. And yeah, if we zoom in here, there's a lot of structure right through here. Almost like this is something else. But then why would there be a trail leading up to something this big? Yeah, I think this has to be something else going on here. Maybe just a different, maybe what this was going on over to feed. Because I do see we have some coloration. Actually, this whole big thing here is something larger. So maybe this little guy was in here eating whatever this larger area is. But still kind of interesting, even though we don't know exactly what it is. I do promise we do sometimes know what things are. I'm just still very, very new at this. So, little arthropod again, little arthropods. Jump forward here. This is probably a piece of trilobite. Again, we've got some really good pyrite nubby creatures here, and we've got 2 of these popping out here, and again we've got the 5 little pokey bits coming out here in the cross section. So this might be in the shape of a U underneath here. I don't know how we would check for that without potentially destroying the rest of the fossil. I mean, we definitely have a bunch of additional little body part bits falling off around here, although those could be dendrites again. Because like right here, these are dendrites through here for sure. But, you know, we do have these nice little iron somethings here. And I suppose there's a small chance that this could just be some sort of pyrite formation. But they do not seem to be like a randomly distributed sort of thing like you would think for a mineral, a natural mineral. Pseudo fossil is what they're referred to as. Those are usually fairly evenly distributed throughout a deposit, where these are just next to each other and basically nowhere else. So they could be some sort of little pyrite crystal thing, but there's also a good chance that that's the remains of some creature. But again, too small, not enough detail. This was another picture under the microscope. It can look like spicules, but these are just shadows from the rock being torn. So that's all of the photos that I've got from working on that first rock. Let me know how I did. What were your favorite parts? And if you happen to have recognized anything, please let me know in the comments, especially if I screwed something up. So I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.